Everyone takes pride that a prosperous America will forever remain an unshakable fortress, that America will always lead the world. But how long will that prosperity last? Or will there be an event that causes America to collapse? That sounds crazy and far-fetched, doesn't it? But don't be too quick to feel confident, because we've just received a letter that, once you hear it, will surely change your beliefs. She went through a most tragic death, and God allowed her to witness the reality of an America veering off its original course and plunging into a severe crisis. So, what did she see? When exactly will this disaster strike? And how can it be prevented? Stay with us until the end to discover the true message the Creator wants to convey to you, and you, the one listening to these words, what will you do when the warning has sounded? Let's start by commenting on your name and the city you live in, so that God's message can spread to every corner of His land. If this reminder stirs your heart, please support this mission by clicking the Super Thanks button. No matter how much you give, God will bless you manifold in return. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, because it's not just an ordinary action. It's a way to spread God's love. Together, let's build a community of 20,000 steadfast believers this month. And now, let's listen to her testimony. My name is Adriana Miles, an emergency physician at a major hospital in downtown Atlanta, Georgia. To many, I was the image of success, an independent woman, sharp, educated, and respected. I had a husband who deeply loved me, or so my colleagues used to say. In my world, there was no room for weakness. But beneath the white coat, I was just a breathing body, an empty heart. A loss I had locked away years ago, not allowing anyone to touch it. I could not fulfill the calling of womanhood. I once believed in God, devoutly, reverently, with high hopes. My husband and I prayed for years to have a child. We tried everything, from hormone therapy to IVF, and finally at age 36, the miracle happened. I was pregnant. We named the baby Eli, a name that means "My God is salvation." I had pictured the future so clearly, a child with chubby cheeks, a laugh that could melt away the exhaustion of an overnight shift, a home filled with voices and joy. I saved every ultrasound printout, washed all the tiny newborn clothes, and decorated the cream-colored nursery with a chandelier shaped like a cloud. But Eli was never born. At the 12-week ultrasound, I lay still on the exam bed, eyes fixed on the screen, searching for signs of life. But all I found was a long, painful silence. No heartbeat. Just the doctor's hand gently on my shoulder and the words that cut through my soul like a blade. "I'm so sorry. I lost my child, and with him the last part of my soul. My husband tried to be strong and comfort me, but he was just a man. How could he possibly understand this pain? But we didn't give up. We tried again. Over 5 years we had 2 more tiny lives, but like Eli, they never saw the sunlight. My body grew weary, my mind numb, and I began to doubt. Then, slowly, I stopped believing in God altogether. My husband and I drifted apart. At the end of each day we'd exchange a glance, and he would find an excuse to leave the house. I never asked where. Perhaps the gym, maybe with friends. Every day I thought about divorce, freeing him and freeing myself. I lived by logic, by medicine, by surgeries and diagnoses. I saved other people's lives, but never bothered to save the faith that had died in me. I watched mothers carry their children into the ER and felt a silent ache. I heard newborns cry in the maternity wing and felt nothing but emptiness. I wasn't jealous, I wasn't angry, I just felt loss. A loss too deep for words and too heavy for anyone to carry with me. And I never imagined that in a moment so close to death, it would be him, the one I had turned away from, who would open his arms and call me home. That morning, the sky over Atlanta was a dull, heavy gray, as if silently mourning what was about to happen. I stepped out of the hospital after a grueling 36-hour shift, my legs dragging across the parking lot. The exhaustion wasn't just physical. It came from an invisible emptiness clinging tightly to my soul. Behind me, the hospital still buzzed like an unrelenting machine, but I had reached the edge of alertness. The night before, I had fought to keep 3 patients alive, people who didn't even know my name. As an ER doctor, I was nothing more than a white blur, gliding through cries of pain and broken bodies. At that moment, all I wanted was to go home, soak in a hot bath, eat something simple, and sleep deep into the afternoon. But then my phone buzzed, shattering the rare moment of silence. A call from the hospital. The nurse's trembling voice reported that a 6-year-old girl had just been admitted, experiencing anaphylactic shock, unresponsive to the first dose of epinephrine, and was being prepped for the ICU. What froze me in place was the name attached. The daughter of April Green, the homeless mother I had met back in February. The memory of April hit me like a blade. I remembered her clearly, clutching her child in her arms, shivering, pleading with me to help with a simple milk allergy case, but I had turned her away, coldly citing hospital policy, no insurance, no treatment. The apology I gave her back then now pierced my chest like a needle. Overwhelmed by guilt, I turned the car around and sped back toward the hospital, my heart pounding inside my rib cage. On the way, I didn't play music. I didn't allow myself to cry. My hands clenched the steering wheel, knuckles pale from the pressure. A light drizzle fell, tiny drops tracing lines down the windshield, like a silent warning. The sky remained heavy, dark, as if bracing for something. And then, in a split second, everything shattered. A massive truck, swerving into the wrong lane because the driver had dozed off, barreled straight toward my car. I didn't have time to brake. Didn't even have time to scream. All I saw was a steel wall swallowing the world whole. The impact was devastating, ripping through space. Glass exploded, metal twisted. My bones felt like they were cracking from within. My body was crushed between the seat and the steering wheel, then thrown violently as the car flipped over in a wild spin. All sounds vanished, leaving only a deafening silence. It was a silence not of this world. No sirens, no heartbeat, just a vast white emptiness, wide and barren, as if the entire universe had been wiped clean. I could no longer feel my body, but something else appeared, a presence I had never allowed myself to believe in, not in all these years. I didn't know I was dying. I only knew that for the first time in so long, my heart was no longer cold. It melted. Into the pain, the regret, and a gentle light drawing near. I had no idea how long I drifted in darkness after the accident. There was no time, no gravity, just a sensation as if my soul had been lifted out of my body and dropped into an invisible buffer zone between two worlds. I found myself standing in a strange space, like an enormous transit station where souls moved about quietly. There were no brilliant lights or calls from the eternal realm, only the overwhelming sense that I was not yet permitted to move on. A voiceless presence, clear yet soundless, echoed through my mind. You are still entangled with the world below. I was led into a room. No walls, no doors. Only vivid images like reels of film. But they weren't of my life. They were the lives of people I had ignored, abandoned, or unintentionally harmed. I didn't just watch their lives unfold. I became them. I lived inside their pain, inside the silent prayers they once whispered. The first scene was April Green's little girl. I was the child, curled up in a hospital bed, breathing shallowly, my body trembling from anaphylactic shock. I felt the bone-deep cold as the machines around me beeped rhythmically, soulless. My mother, April, held my hand, tears streaming down her face, but I knew she was powerless. No insurance, no money. The hospital only did the bare minimum. I longed to be held, for a warm embrace from the doctor standing just a few steps away. But she walked past, with a cold, rushed look in her eyes. If that doctor had hugged me that day, I heard myself say, as the little girl's soul, I wouldn't have felt so cold when I died. My heart shattered. It wasn't my fault, but the fault of a frigid healthcare system where an uninsured child was deemed unworthy of full treatment. The next scene pulled me into the body of a middle-aged man I had encountered during a night shift 3 years ago. He was having a heart attack, but with no insurance and an overwhelmed ER, he was given painkillers and sent home. I became him, feeling my chest tighten, breath growing shorter with each second. I saw his wife sitting beside him, desperately calling around for loans, but no one would help. I saw him look at me, Dr. Adriana, with pleading eyes, but I only shook my head, saying there was nothing more we could do. In that moment I felt his despair, his utter sense of abandonment by the world. He died 2 days later at home, without a doctor by his side. His pain seeped into me like a wound that would never heal. Each scene was a slice into my soul. I wanted to scream, to apologize, to do it all over again. But the soul room didn't allow me to speak. It only forced me to feel. It made me carry the weight of their pain. The voiceless presence returned, whispering, "Your entanglements were not your fault, but you chose to remain still. Now, you are given a chance to change." A gentle light appeared, not blinding but warm, like moonlight spilling across a still lake. From within that light a figure gradually emerged, a female angel with eyes so deep they seemed to hold both sorrow and hope. She wore a white robe, but it wasn't like the medical blouses I used to wear. It shimmered as if woven from strands of light. The angel stepped closer, and I felt a strange familiarity, as if we had met before, perhaps in another lifetime. "I was once a doctor, like you," she said. "I too walked the hospital corridors, heard the cries of patients, and allowed my heart to grow cold under the weight of rigid policies." I lowered my head in shame, but she placed an invisible hand on my shoulder, and through it came a comfort I had never known. "Your indifference didn't come from cruelty," she continued, "but from having lost the heavenly vision of the human soul. You forgot that every person you meet carries within them a fragment of eternal light." I wanted to speak, to justify myself, but before I could utter a word, the angel took my hand, a weightless yet powerful touch. The space around me dissolved, and I found myself standing in the middle of an endless field of light. The grass shimmered as though bathed in silver dew, and the air was filled with a gentle melody, like the song of thousands of souls intertwined in harmony. I looked around, and my heart nearly stopped when I recognized them, the souls I had once abandoned. April's little girl, the man with the heart attack, the elderly woman with a broken hip, and countless others I had passed by throughout my years of work. They stood there, without blame, without anger. They were singing, and within that song I felt something indescribable. Forgiveness. The angel stood beside me, silently observing. "Do you see?" she said, her voice still as gentle as a breeze. "Souls don't hold on to pain forever. They forgive, for they have returned to the light. But you, Adriana, still have time to bring that light to the earthly world." She reached out and touched my forehead, and a warm flow surged through me, as if washing away the scars buried deep in my soul. "Remember this field," she whispered, "when you feel lost." The field of light slowly faded, and I found myself back in the soul transit station, but my heart now felt lighter. The angel had vanished, but her words still echoed within me, like a small flame guiding my way. I stood once more in the stillness of the transit realm, my heart still lingering in the warmth of the field of forgiveness. The angel had departed, but the comfort of her words remained, like a small flame guiding the way. Suddenly, the space around me trembled slightly, and another light appeared, not gentle like before, but radiant, powerful, as if the entire universe was converging into a single point. From within that light, a figure emerged. I didn't need to see his face to know who he was. My heart, though no longer bound to the physical body, trembled in reverence. It was the Lord. He said nothing at first. He only looked at me, and in his eyes I saw both love and authority. I wanted to fall to my knees, to say something in defense of the years I had spent in apathy, but he raised his hand, and instantly a peace overwhelmed me, silencing my thoughts. "You have seen the souls you once abandoned," his voice echoed, not through sound but as if etched into the deepest part of my mind. "But now you will see what awaits the world." He touched my forehead, and in that moment the world I once knew disappeared, replaced by visions that were vivid, painful, and terrifying. In the vision I saw the global economy collapse, not like a quiet tide receding, but like a massive tower having its foundation ripped away, crashing down amid the screams of humanity. Every scene appeared vivid, sharp, as if I was standing at the center of the chaos. I saw the opulent halls of Beijing, where Chinese leaders with cold eyes and razor-sharp voices stood before representatives of the US government. They held up staggering debt figures, lifeless sheets of paper that weighed as much as mountains, demanding repayment that America could not fulfill. The air was suffocating, tense, like a tightened string about to snap. There were no agreements, no reconciliatory handshakes, only a deadly silence foretelling the coming storm. The vision shifted, and I saw stock markets around the world drowning in the blazing red of collapse. Screens on Wall Street blinked with plummeting numbers, like blood flowing from a wound that could not be closed. Traders, once proud in tailored suits, now screamed into phones, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot with panic. In Tokyo, London, Shanghai, the same scenes repeated. Screams blended with alarm bells ringing through the trading floors. Currency lost its value so fast that bills in people's wallets turned to trash, only worth burning for warmth during freezing winter nights. I saw grand banks, once symbols of power and stability, reduced to empty shells. Skyscrapers with glistening glass that I had once seen on television now loomed in eerie silence. Windows shattered, sharp fragments glittering under the pale sunlight, as if telling stories of pride that had crumbled. Inside, teller counters were abandoned, papers danced in the wind like ghosts of a once thriving era. Museums ceased to work, their screens black, and long lines of people stood outside, clutching now worthless bank cards, their faces etched with despair. Panic spread across the globe like wildfire consuming a dry forest. I saw markets in Africa where people shoved one another for the last overpriced bags of rice. In Europe, supermarkets were looted, shelves stripped bare, leaving only broken glass and the cries of mothers unable to bring food home to their children. In America, once vibrant streets filled with neon lights had gone dark, with only police sirens echoing through crowds of angry citizens. Factories shut down, workers laid off, and middle-class families, once proud of their homes and cars, now lined up at soup kitchens, their eyes empty. But the vision showed me this was only the beginning. The economic collapse was not just numbers on a screen or abandoned buildings. It was a cold wind sweeping through every home, every heart, sowing the seeds for even greater, more violent conflicts. I stood there in the space of the vision, feeling the weight of a world cracking apart, and an invisible fear tightening around my soul. I knew that what I had witnessed was only the first stone tumbling down, triggering an avalanche that would bury everything in its path. In the stillness of the vision, I felt a chill run down my spine as the scene before me shifted, as if the entire world had been swept into a storm of darkness. I saw World War III break out, but not in the way I had ever imagined from books or movies. There were no battles between nations with clear borders, no opposing flags clashing on a battlefield. Instead, the flames of war erupted from the ashes of economic collapse, like a massive fault line splitting wide open, shattering all order. I expected nuclear explosions, terrifying mushroom clouds rising into the sky like in doomsday tales, but there was nothing like that. What I saw was even more terrifying. governments turning against their own people. Like cornered beasts, they no longer protected, but attacked those who had once placed their trust in them. Civil wars erupted, not between countries, but within the heart of each nation, from tiny towns to glittering cities. Streets that once gleamed with neon lights now burned with fire, screams and shattering glass. I saw the poor, the oppressed through generations, rise with flames in their eyes. They were no longer silent, no longer bowing their heads to empty promises. In the vision I heard them cry out in unison, "Enough!" A cry that echoed from the slums of Africa, through the crowded alleys of Asia, to the grand boulevards of Europe. They grabbed sticks, stones, anything they could use as weapons, and surged forward to overthrow the elite, those who had lived in luxury atop their suffering. Government buildings were ablaze, statues of power collapsed, and walls of privilege crumbled under the wrath of the masses. Black smoke spiraled into the sky, blotting out the sun, as if even nature mourned. I saw a square in Africa where mothers with frail arms held up handmade signs demanding justice. In Europe, boulevards, once symbols of civilization, were now littered with shattered glass from luxury shops, overturned cars, and dried bloodstains on cobblestones. Asia fared no better. Bustling markets had become battlefields where street vendors and factory workers rose against riot police. Nowhere on earth was spared from this vortex of violence. From remote villages in South America to frozen cities in the Arctic, the fire of uprising spread like an unstoppable flood. In the vision, I saw children standing at the roadside, empty-eyed as they watched their parents fight. I saw the elderly, once hopeful for a peaceful final chapter of life, now fleeing through smoky chaos. Gunshots, homemade bombs, and screams fused into a terrifying symphony that echoed endlessly. But what weighed on my heart more than the violence was the collapse of trust. People no longer saw each other as fellow humans. They only saw enemies, whether neighbor or someone who once shared a meal. This vision wasn't just visual, it was visceral. I felt the desperation of those fighting, the fear of those fleeing, and the agony of those who lost everything. I wanted to look away, to scream for it to stop, but it kept playing, like a film in slow motion, forcing me to witness every detail. The world I once knew, with rules, with fragile hopes, had become a battlefield of smoke, fire, and collapse. As the vision faded, I stood in silence, my heart heavy as if it carried the weight of the entire world. I didn't know how to face what I had just seen, but I knew it wasn't merely a warning, it was a calling. Could I, a mere doctor, do anything to stop this nightmare? I didn't yet have the answer, but deep within my soul, I felt a new flame ignite, a flame of resolve, not to let the world descend into the darkness I had just witnessed. In the vision, the people reclaimed control, but their victory did not last. Their triumphant cries echoed through the crumbling streets like a fleeting anthem, but that joy was short-lived. From the ashes of the old world, others rose, those just as hungry for power as the ones who had been overthrown. They emerged with sweet promises, slogans of order and peace, but their eyes were cold, glinting with cruelty. I saw the people, those who had once hoped for a better future, herded like cattle into vast zones enclosed by barbed wire fences. The sharp metal glistened under a dim sun, like blades that would forever separate them from freedom. These zones weren't dwellings, but giant prisons, with towering watchtowers and soldiers dressed in black uniforms, their faces hidden behind expressionless masks. The cries of children mixed with the whistling wind through the wire, forming a mournful, haunting symphony. A new law was enacted globally: population control. I didn't understand why. I saw no justification, only that it happened with a cold, unimaginable ruthlessness. Announcements were blared from crackling loudspeakers, repeating like a curse, "For the survival of humanity, every individual must comply." But that survival was a lie. I saw families torn apart, young people taken away in sealed trucks, and the elderly left behind without explanation. No one dared ask why. Those who questioned simply vanished into the darkness. The once bustling cities where neon lights once lit up the night sky had become war-torn ruins. Skyscrapers leaned and crumbled, their walls scarred by bullets. Roads that once bustled with traffic were now buried in rubble, glass, concrete, and shattered lives. People wandered hungry among the debris, eyes sunken, their skin coated with grime. They had no money, no possessions. Food became the only currency, more precious than gold. A loaf of bread could buy a life, and a can of beans could spark a war. Factions formed like wildfires, spreading fast, impossible to contain. Allies today became enemies tomorrow. Trust between people disappeared, replaced by suspicion and fear. I saw groups whispering in dark corners, plotting to overthrow this faction or raid another's food store. But no one ruled for long. Every rise to power birthed a new rebellion, and the cycle of violence repeated endlessly. I wanted to turn away, to shut my eyes and not witness anymore, but the vision wouldn't allow it. It pulled me deeper, forcing me to face the brutality of this new world. I saw a child, no older than 10, huddled by the roadside, clutching a dry piece of bread. His eyes were vacant, as if he had forgotten how to hope. Not far from him, a mother looked at her emaciated child, lips tightly sealed to hold back her sobs. She had no strength left to comfort, no offerings but empty prayers. And then I saw a father, blood staining his shirt, charging into a crowd to protect a bag of rice, the only thing that could keep his family alive a little longer. He fell and never rose again. But even in death, his arms clutched that bag of rice like it was his entire world. The world I once knew was gone. It had become a vast battlefield where survival was a never-ending struggle. Every face bore the mark of suffering, every breath carried the weight of loss. I wanted to scream, to ask why humanity had allowed itself to fall into such a pit, but the vision continued, like a film that would never stop. When it finally faded, I stood there in a vast white space, tears streaming down not from fear, but from pain for what I had just witnessed. That world, though only a vision, had carved itself into my soul as a reminder that every choice I make, no matter how small, could alter the future. As the final vision faded, the world full of fire and sorrow in my mind slowly gave way to a profound stillness. I found myself standing before God once more, in a space flooded with radiant light, as if the entire universe had gathered around him. He stood there, not towering like a monument, but emanating a gentle authority that made it impossible for me to look away. "Why did you show me these things?" I whispered, my voice choked with emotion, like a lost child pleading for an answer. He looked at me, his gaze both tender and resolute, as if piercing through every mask I had ever built to hide my weakness. "You are part of this world, Adriana." His voice resounded, not through sound, but carved directly into my soul, each word carrying the weight of truth. "What you've seen is not destiny, but the consequence of collective choices. You have been forgiven by the souls you once abandoned, but now you must choose. Will you continue to stand still, or will you bring light into the darkness?" Then he paused, his eyes softening, as though gazing into the deepest corners of my spirit. "Your children," he said, and my heart nearly stopped. "They are coming to you, Adriana. They stand at the threshold of incarnation, ready to enter your life when the time comes." I trembled, thinking of the dreams of family I had long buried, the hopes crushed under the harshness of my work, but he wasn't finished. "And the children you've lost," he continued, his voice now full of compassion, "they are in heaven, safe in my arms. They pray for you every day, Adriana, that you may find your way." Those words flowed through me like a cool spring, washing away all the pain I had carried over the years of loss. My tears fell, not from sorrow, but from gratitude and hope. The light around him slowly faded, like stars dissolving into the dawn. I found myself back in the stark white realm of the transit station, but I was no longer the same Adriana. I would become a bearer of light, fighting relentlessly for the patients forsaken by the system, for a world teetering on the edge, and for the children, both those I lost and those yet to come, so they would not have to grow up in a world swallowed by darkness. While Adriana's story ends with a revival of faith and a divine mission, the man in the next story was not as fortunate. His experience was passed down through his own son, who recounted it after a strange sleepwalking episode. If Adriana was shown signs of a nation already beginning to collapse, this man was warned of something even further ahead, a prophetic vision of America's future, starting in the year 2047, a time when the nation's leader refuses to change course. Stay until the end to uncover the deeper truths that God is revealing to humanity through these chosen souls. Welcome to Eternal Bible Stories. Our channel shares the near-death experiences of those who have died and seen the other side. If you enjoy these videos, please consider hitting the like button, subscribing, and turning on the notification bell so you never miss new content. It's completely free and helps support the channel. Today, we have an incredibly fascinating story sent in by a viewer. This person came across a near-death experience on a news forum and decided to share it with us. In this testimony, a man died and was given a terrifying prophecy by Jesus about the future of humanity. What he reveals throughout his story may leave you speechless. So find a comfortable place, grab a cup of coffee or tea, and join me as we dive into today's experience. Hello, Eternal Bible Stories. My name is Jim. I run a forum where people from all over the world share their experiences, including near-death experiences. While browsing through some old posts, I stumbled upon something that I knew would interest you. A near-death testimony written by a former member of our community. This man passed away in 2020, but his story deserves to be remembered forever. He spoke extensively about the future and the events yet to come. What he described is both astonishing and deeply unsettling, and as I read through his account, I couldn't shake the feeling that this is something people need to hear now more than ever. So today I am sharing his testimony. Take from it what you will, but be warned, what you are about to hear may change the way you see the future. I never dared to reveal this before, but before it's too late, I must confess. I died on November 12, 2007. This is not an exaggeration or a metaphor. I literally died. My heart stopped for 3 minutes and 42 seconds inside an ambulance. The doctors called it a temporary cessation of cardiac activity, but I call it the moment when everything changed forever. For 10 years, I carried the burden of what I saw during those few minutes. Visions of the future, revelations too shocking to ignore, and even glimpses of hell itself, a place most people refuse to believe exists. The things I witnessed were beyond comprehension, and for a long time I kept them to myself, afraid of being dismissed as delusional. But I can't stay silent any longer. What I saw is starting to unfold in the real world. Someone needs to know the truth, and that's why I'm telling my story now. It was supposed to be a routine chore, clearing leaves off the roof before winter arrived. The forecast predicted rain later in the week, and I had been procrastinating for months. That afternoon felt like any other, ordinary in every way. Yet for some reason my mind has preserved every tiny detail. The earthy scent of damp leaves, the coarse grit of the shingles beneath my boots, the distant chatter of children playing on the street, and the warm glow of the late afternoon sun casting elongated shadows across my neighbor's yard. It's strange how the brain clings to seemingly insignificant moments, as if sensing they will be the last. I reached out to remove the last clump of wet leaves clogging the gutter, when my foot slipped off the ladder rung. The moment unfolded in a paradox of time. both instantaneous and endless. A cold wave of realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was falling. My hands scrambled desperately for anything to hold on to, but there was nothing but open air. And then everything slowed. Time stretched unnaturally, distorting the world around me. I saw my house from unfamiliar angles, the cracked paint beneath the eaves, the delicate twigs of a bird's nest I had never noticed before. The setting sun reflected off my kitchen windows, turning them into molten squares of gold. Then I struck the ground. The doctors would later explain that the force of the impact was equivalent to being hit with a sledgehammer. My skull fractured in 3 places. My legs snapped in multiple spots after colliding with the ladder on my way down. My tailbone was crushed beyond repair. But it was the trauma to my head that caused my heart to stop. Pain vanished before my brain could even process it. One moment there was agony, the next, nothing. No sound, no sensation, no thought, a complete void. I had died. The pain vanished in an instant. 1 second I had been drowning in agony, my body shattered upon impact, every nerve screaming. Next, I was weightless, floating above the scene. I could see my own body sprawled on the concrete, blood spreading from my head like ink spilling across paper. Yet I felt nothing. No pain, no panic, no desperation to return. I was detached, a silent observer watching my own death unfold below. Everything was unnervingly clear. I saw my wife Jean on her knees, screaming my name, her hands reaching for me as if she could pull me back. Our neighbor Bill was gripping her shoulders, trying to keep her upright, his face pale with shock. A few houses down, I noticed someone peeking out their front door, hesitant, uncertain. But then my attention locked onto my daughter, Hannah. She had just rushed outside, her phone pressed to her ear, calling 911. Then she saw me. The color drained from her face, and the phone slipped from her fingers, clattering onto the pavement. She didn't move, didn't speak. She simply stood there, frozen in horror, her mind unable to process what her eyes were seeing. I wanted to run to her, to wrap my arms around her and tell her I was okay, but I had no arms, no voice. I was a presence without form. The paramedics arrived, their movements efficient yet strangely distorted, as if they were submerged in water. One of them knelt beside my body, shining a flashlight into my lifeless eyes. Another cut open my shirt, pressing electrodes to my chest, his expression grim. I heard their voices, but they sounded distant, hollow, as though they were coming from another world. "We're losing him," one of them said. I should have felt fear then. I should have panicked at the finality of those words. But I didn't. Instead, a sensation unlike anything I had ever known enveloped me. Pure, undiluted peace. It was not the kind of peace that comes from quiet or stillness. It was a peace that felt like being held, like being known completely and loved without condition. It washed over me, stripping away all fear, all pain, all regret. I did not long to return to my body. I did not yearn to hold on to life. There was only acceptance, a gentle, undeniable understanding that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. And then I saw it. A light. It was not like the light of the sun or the glow of a fire. It was something more, something alive. It pulsed with warmth, beckoning me, wrapping around me like the embrace of an old friend. It was impossibly bright, yet it did not hurt my eyes. It did not blind me. Instead, it filled me with an indescribable sense of belonging. And then I heard the sound. It was music, but not in any earthly sense. It was harmony itself, a perfect chorus that resonated through my very being. The closest I can compare it to is that moment in a song when a chord progression is so beautiful, so powerful, that it sends chills down your spine. Except this was infinite, magnified beyond comprehension, layered with something divine. It was joy, it was love, It was everything good and pure, woven into a single, perfect melody. The light expanded, and I knew I was leaving. The world I had known, the people I had loved, the life I had lived, they were behind me now. But I did not mourn. I did not feel sorrow, because in that moment I understood something I had never truly grasped before. I was going home, and then the tunnel appeared. It was not dark, not foreboding. It was filled with that same brilliant, living light, stretching endlessly before me. I did not walk, I did not run. I was simply pulled forward, effortlessly, as if I had been weightless my entire life, and only now had returned to my natural state. There was no fear, no hesitation, because for the first time in my entire existence, I felt whole. The tunnel was nothing like I had expected. It was not dark, foreboding, or suffocating. Instead, it radiated a brilliance so intense that it should have been blinding, yet somehow it wasn't. It was brighter than the sun, yet I could look directly into it without pain, without discomfort. The light was alive, pulsing with a warmth that wrapped around me, pulling me forward with a force that was gentle yet undeniable. It did not feel like an empty tunnel, but rather an opening into something vast. The air, or whatever this place consisted of, was thick with a presence I could not yet define. It was not just light that filled the space, but sound. A melody unlike anything I had ever heard resonated from every direction, weaving through me, surrounding me, becoming a part of me. It was not just music. It was pure harmony, a perfect chorus that vibrated through my very essence. It was as if millions of voices were singing in unison, yet no individual voice stood out. There were no words, no lyrics, just waves of sound infused with meaning. Joy, peace, love. The closest thing I can compare it to is hearing a song so beautiful that it moves you to tears, but this feeling was multiplied beyond comprehension. As I drifted forward, the tunnel seemed infinite, stretching in every direction, yet I knew with absolute certainty that I was being guided somewhere. The walls of the tunnel were not solid, not made of any material I could recognize, but rather swirling layers of luminescence, shifting and shimmering in colors I had never seen before. Hues beyond the earthly spectrum danced around me. Deep purples that radiated warmth, blues so rich they seemed to hum, golds that shone with an intensity beyond anything I had ever witnessed. It was as if the very essence of life and energy flowed through these walls, vibrating with an unspoken truth. The deeper I traveled, the stronger the feeling of love became. It was not the fragile, conditional love I had known on earth. This was something greater, something unbreakable. It was love in its purest form, overwhelming, consuming, yet completely gentle. It did not judge, it did not demand, it simply was. And as it filled me, I realized something profound. I had been searching for this love my entire life without even knowing it. Every moment of longing, every sense of emptiness, every ache in my soul had been a yearning for this, for him. And then I saw him, not as a distant figure, not as the frail, sorrowful image I had seen in church paintings, but as something more, something beyond what my mind could fully grasp. Jesus. His presence was all-encompassing, more real than anything I had ever known. He was not just standing before me, he was the light, radiating from every part of him, filling the entire space with an intensity that should have been unbearable. Yet, instead of fear, I felt only comfort. Instead of judgment, I felt only understanding. I could not move, not because I was paralyzed, but because I was transfixed. The love that emanated from him was not just something I felt, it was something I became a part of. It washed over me, through me, stripping away every burden, every regret, every piece of myself that had ever been broken. Standing in his presence, I understood everything, not in words, not in thoughts, but in a deep, unshakable knowing. I was fully seen, fully known, and yet still fully loved. He did not speak, yet his message resonated within me as if it had been imprinted onto my soul. I understood him without hearing a single word. It was as though entire libraries of wisdom, of knowledge, were being downloaded into me in a single moment. He was not simply showing me things, he was allowing me to experience them, to live them. And then he revealed to me what I had not yet been prepared to see. Visions unfolded before me, not like glimpses or flashes, but as vivid realities. I was not just observing, I was there, inside them, feeling every moment with clarity so intense it was indistinguishable from reality. I saw the future. I saw what was coming, and as the images consumed me, I understood why I had been brought here. I had to see. I had to know, because the world was about to change forever. The visions Jason showed me weren't fleeting glimpses or scattered images. They were real, immersive experiences. I wasn't just watching, I was living them. Every loss, every consequence, every desperate struggle, I felt it all. The first warning signs appeared long before 2047, but by then, humanity was on an irreversible path. It didn't start with war, not with nuclear bombs or armies. It started with something far more insidious: scarcity. Water, the most basic necessity, became the source of collapse. Droughts dragged on for years, draining the world's lifeblood. By 2043, Phoenix was uninhabitable. The once mighty Colorado River shrank to a trickle, and Lake Mead cracked open like parched earth. Millions of Americans were forced to flee, becoming climate refugees in their own country. The Southwest was the first to fall. Las Vegas, a city built in defiance of the desert, tried to survive with massive water reclamation projects, but by 2045, it was a shadow of itself. The neon lights of the Strip flickered out, leaving behind abandoned casinos, their facades sandblasted by relentless wind. The wealthy holed up in underground aqua estates, guarding the last reserves of deep aquifers, while the rest of the population faced two choices: leave or die. Then I saw Miami drown, not in a single catastrophic storm, not in a tsunami, but in a slow, agonizing descent beneath the waves. The rich were the first to leave, abandoning the city to those who had nowhere else to go. By 2047, the poorest survivors lived in the upper floors of flooded buildings, navigating through the city in makeshift boats. The water was a toxic mix of chemicals, sewage, and waste. Children played in it because they had no other choice. Their skin developed strange lesions, but staying inside the sweltering, mold-infested high-rises was even worse. New York held out longer. In the early 2040s, they built massive seawalls, desperate to hold back the ocean. But they had overlooked one fatal flaw. Water didn't just come from above, it rose from below. The subways, once the veins of the city, became tunnels for the flood. By 2049, Lower Manhattan was gone. The survivors lived in a new network of elevated walkways connecting skyscrapers. The wealthy moved to the heights, while the poor were left in the wet zones, forever pumping water out of their homes, their lungs scarred by a new disease doctors called flood lung. Mold was everywhere, creeping through the rotting skeleton of the city. But the place that shocked me the most was the Midwest. America's breadbasket, the heartland, became unrecognizable. At first, the warming seemed like a blessing, longer growing seasons, record harvests. But then, everything changed. Storms became biblical. Rain so relentless it stripped the soil clean, followed by months of brutal drought that turned fields into dust. Kansas became a desert. Nebraska looked like Nevada. After 3 years of failed crops, food shortages triggered riots. The government tried to ration supplies, but in many places it failed. I watched as towns collapsed. National Guard troops abandoned their posts to protect their own families. Police stations burned. But in the ashes, something new was born. Communities that rebuilt, not with money or power, but through survival and cooperation. Society fractured beyond repair. The ultra-wealthy sealed themselves inside enclosed metropolises, self-sustaining skyscraper cities that produced their own food, water, and power. Outside their walls, something else emerged. Water clans. Survivors who adapted, who learned to live with the flood. Floating markets took the place of supermarkets. Schools drifted on interconnected barges. They built a new way of life from the wreckage. Not everything collapsed. The Great Lakes became the new heart of America. Cities like Detroit, Buffalo, and Cleveland flourished, revitalized by waves of climate refugees. Abandoned factories transformed into vertical farms. Rooftops became sprawling greenhouses. Entire buildings were repurposed for food production. Technology didn't evolve the way we once imagined. No flying cars, no AI-controlled utopias. Instead, it adapted for survival. Atmospheric water harvesters became as common as air conditioners once were. Solar energy advanced beyond recognition, not in panels, but in thin film coatings, turning entire cityscapes into energy generators. Batteries shifted to colossal underground salt reserves, storing power for weeks. Transportation changed forever. Private cars disappeared. Roads were repurposed for electric buses, high-speed rail, and light transit. Airlines collapsed, unable to withstand fuel shortages and extreme weather. The way people moved, the way cities functioned, it all transformed. Education was no longer about degrees. Schools became survival hubs. Kids learned hydroponic farming, solar engineering, and water purification alongside math and science. History classes weren't about the past anymore. They studied the collapse of civilizations, so they wouldn't repeat the same mistakes. But the greatest losses weren't cities or technology. It was life itself. I saw the last wild elephants, the last tigers, the final breath of untouched forests. But I also saw humanity fight to undo the damage. By 2060, desperate efforts to rewild the Earth had begun. DNA archives brought back extinct species, not as exhibits, but as vital pieces of broken ecosystems. Face changed too. Some people turned to apocalyptic cults, convinced the end had come. But more people found unity, understanding that division had doomed them before. That only by coming together could they rebuild. Even the rich, locked away in their fortified towers, learned that isolation was a death sentence. By 2061, the walls came down, not by force, but by necessity. Survival required cooperation. The world didn't end, but the world we once knew was gone. And yet, in the midst of the wreckage, I saw hope. Children played in forests that hadn't existed in 100 years. They wore protective suits, yes, but they laughed. Cities were cleaner. The air was clearing. New rivers flowed where old ones had dried up. Jesus showed me how everything was connected. Every choice, every act of kindness or cruelty. He let me see my own failures, the times I had turned away from suffering because it was easier. But he didn't judge me. He only helped me understand. I wept, not for what was lost, but for what could still be saved. Then he told me I had to go back. I begged to stay. I pleaded for more time, more knowledge, more understanding, but Jesus only smiled, a smile so full of love and certainty that it left no room for argument. He told me it was not my time, that I had work to do, that there were people I needed to help, that I had to share what I had seen, even if no one believed me. And then everything went dark. It felt like being pulled backward through a tunnel at unimaginable speed. The light, the warmth, the presence of Jesus, all vanished in an instant. The next thing I knew, I was gasping for air, my body racked with pain. I felt a sharp jolt in my chest, the crushing weight of hands pressing down in rhythmic compressions. My vision was blurry, but I saw frantic faces around me. Paramedics working desperately to revive me. One of them was shouting something, but I couldn't make it out. My ears were ringing, my body felt like it had been hit by a truck. It took a few moments before I realized what had happened. I was back. Later, I learned that I had been clinically dead for 3 minutes and 42 seconds. To the doctors, my revival was nothing short of a medical miracle. They had seen patients in far better condition fail to return. To them, I was just lucky, but I knew the truth. It had nothing to do with luck. The days that followed were filled with unexplainable occurrences. Machines monitoring my vitals started acting strangely, registering patterns that the doctors couldn't understand. Some readings fluctuated in ways that defied medical logic. At night, my hospital room would glow faintly, though there was no clear source of light. One nurse, someone who had worked in the hospital for over a decade, quit the very next day after witnessing something in my room. She had been checking my monitors when she claimed she saw my heartbeat sync perfectly with something, some external rhythm she couldn't explain. I never saw her again, but I overheard the other nurses whispering about it. When the doctors scanned my brain, they found something else, a pattern in my brainwaves that they had never seen before. It was unlike any recorded case. They couldn't explain it, and neither could I. Physical recovery was brutal. 3 months in the hospital, 6 more in physical therapy. I had to relearn how to walk, how to regain control over my muscles. The pain was unbearable at times, but the physical suffering wasn't the hardest part. The hardest part was knowing what I had seen and trying to live with that knowledge. How was I supposed to return to normal life after witnessing the future? How could I go about my days pretending everything was fine, knowing what was coming? At first, I tried to warn people. I wrote letters to newspapers, trying to explain my visions in a way that didn't make me sound insane. I reached out to environmental organizations, hoping someone would take me seriously, but no one did. No one believed me. Some thought I was just another doomsday prophet, another conspiracy theorist shouting into the void. Others assumed the head trauma had affected my mind. One psychologist even told me that my visions were nothing more than my brain's attempt to cope with the trauma. Even my own brother cut ties with me. He stopped talking to me for 2 years, convinced that I had joined some apocalyptic cult. It was one of the deepest wounds I carried. I had expected strangers to doubt me, but my own family? That was harder to accept. Despite everything, I never truly felt alone. That presence, the warmth, the light from the tunnel, never fully left me. There were moments when I could feel it so strongly that it nearly overwhelmed me, a pressure in my chest, a weightless, peaceful sensation. And sometimes it came when someone needed help. Like the night in 2009, I had been asleep when I woke up suddenly at 2 a.m., heart pounding, an overwhelming urge pulling me out of bed. I had no explanation, no logical reason, but I knew I needed to drive downtown immediately. I didn't hesitate. I threw on a jacket, got in my car and started driving. I had no idea what I was looking for. Then, as I turned onto 3rd Street, I saw her. A young woman standing at the edge of the 3rd Street bridge, staring down into the dark water below. I pulled over, got out of my car and walked toward her. Slowly, carefully, I could feel her pain before she even spoke. She was on the verge of letting go. I didn't try to stop her with logic. I told her what I had seen. I told her about the tunnel, the light, the overwhelming love I had felt in Jesus' presence. I told her that she was not alone, that she was loved, that she was meant to be here. She sobbed. She collapsed into my arms, shaking. We sat there for hours, just talking, just existing together in that moment. She never jumped. Today, she's a counselor. She spends her life helping others who have lost hope. And if that was the only reason I had been sent back, it would have been enough. But I know that my purpose is bigger than just that one night. The world doesn't believe me, but I keep sharing, because I have to. I still feel the weight of what I saw. Every year the world inches closer to the future I was shown. Every disaster, every crisis, it all aligns with what I was told would happen. I cannot change the future alone, but I can warn people. I can give them hope. I no longer care whether they believe me or not, because one day they will see it for themselves. And I pray that when that day comes, they will remember my words. The following days, after I decided to share my story, I realized a harsh truth. Most people did not want to hear it. They were afraid of the truth, or simply refused to believe it. I was mocked, called a lunatic, a delusional man trying to spread meaningless fear. Even those closest to me began to distance themselves. Old friends no longer wanted to meet. Colleagues looked at me with suspicion. But none of that mattered, because I knew what I had seen, and I could not stay silent. I started spending more time observing the world, and the most terrifying thing was that everything was unfolding exactly as I had seen in my vision. Droughts in the American Southwest were getting worse. Major reservoirs like Lake Mead and Lake Powell were drying up. Food and water riots were beginning to emerge in the hardest-hit areas. Storms were growing stronger than ever, wiping out coastal cities and leaving millions homeless. Everything I had warned about was starting to happen, yet too few were willing to listen. I also noticed that I was changing in ways I couldn't explain. My intuition had become sharper than ever. I could sense when someone was in danger, when a major event was about to unfold. There were times when I suddenly stopped my car on the highway, only for a massive accident to happen seconds later, right before my eyes. How did I know? I had no answer, but every day things like that happened more and more often. I no longer saw life the way I used to. All the things I once valued, money, status, power, suddenly felt meaningless. I turned down promotions, rejected opportunities that would have made me wealthier, because I understood that the world was changing in ways that made material possessions irrelevant. The only thing that mattered was people, the ones we could help, the ones we could guide before it was too late. One night, I dreamed of that light again, but this time it was no longer peaceful. I saw terrifying visions, cities collapsing, people fleeing in panic, vast lands turning to barren wastelands without a single drop of water. But amid all the destruction, I saw something that gave me hope. Small groups of people coming together to build a new world. A world where humans learned to survive together rather than against each other. I woke up, my heart pounding, with a deep realization that I could not give up. I began helping anyone I could. I joined community groups, assisted the homeless, supported environmental initiatives, and most importantly, I never stopped speaking about what I had seen. I did not force anyone to believe me, but I planted seeds of awareness and hope in their hearts. I believed that one day, when the things I spoke of began to unfold, they would remember my words. I don't know how much time I have left to do this, but I know one thing for certain. I will not stay silent. I will continue to share, continue to warn, and most importantly, continue to help those who are willing to listen. Because one day, when the world begins to change faster than ever before, there will be people who remember what I have said, and they will be ready. Perhaps one day I will be called back to the place I once visited, but until then I have a mission, a purpose, and even if only one person in a million believes me, that alone is enough for me to keep going. This is the full experience of an anonymous man, shared on a social media forum. According to the person who provided this story, the man passed away in 2020. However, that does not mean his testimony has lost its value. In fact, it seems that the warnings he left behind are beginning to unfold before our eyes. Do you believe that the world will face the catastrophic events he described in 2047 and 2061? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. May God bless you.